The story opens with a broad shot high across the treeline of a rich, green rainforest. Intercut is a succession of pictures of Jake Sully, Sam Worthington, a disabled conflict veteran and previous Marine. He awakens in a Goliath spaceship en route to Pandora, a thickly forested Earth-like moon circling Polyphemus, a monster blue planet like Jupiter. He is one of countless travelers, all awakening after just about 6 years of cryosleep on the way to Pandora. Floating out of his dozing unit in 0G, he's tended by the boat's staff. He opens his storage, which is checked contaminate T. Jake lets us know that he has a departed twin sibling, Tom, a researcher, who was to be important for an undeniable level program managed by corporate and military tacticians to concentrate on the climate and occupants of Pandora. Since Jake and his sibling are a careful hereditary match, he was given an extraordinary open door, assume control over his sibling's agreement with a corporate military element and travel with as little luggage as possible years away to a station on the recently witnessed world. Pandora. Recognizing the thoughts of being free and having a new beginning, Jake consents to the arrangement as his sibling's body is incinerated. Presently being moved from the spaceship to Pandora by means of a van, Jake is one of many troopers and regular citizen workforce going to land on Pandora, a few 4.3 light a very long time from Earth. We get perspectives on the base and its development and gigantic mining machines uncovering the dirt in an enormous quarry as Jake contemplates his new job. The travelers are undeniably trained to wear a full-face breathing cover since the climate of the planet won't uphold human existence. 20 seconds of openness to the harmful air of the planet causes obviousness, with death happening around 4 minutes after the fact. While different travelers land and make their most memorable strides onto the base, called Damnation's Entryway, which is encircled by a colossal edge wall, Jake follows them in his wheelchair, procuring the moniker, Dinners on Wheels, from a couple of haughty Marines. He recognizes through voiceover that he lost the utilization of his legs during one of his deployments on the planet. And keeping in mind that a spinal injury like his can be fixed, it takes cash, which is difficult to get a hold of in the current economy, Jake goes promptly to a tactical instructions where Colonel Miles Quaritch, Stephen Lang, is tending to the gathered officers and a couple of regular people who have gone along. He reminds them they're not in Kansas anymore, and he educates them concerning Pandora's native populace, the Nausicaa. Quaritch, brandishing a heavy of scars in favor of his head, says they are difficult to kill and essentially everything out there will attempt to kill you. What's more, while he must keep his kin alive, he says he won't prevail in this assignment, not with every one of you. On the off chance that they wish to get by, he proceeds, they should follow Pandora rules. Jake goes to a science lab where he meets scientist Norm Spellman, Joel David Moore, and Dr. Max Patel, Dilip Rao, 2 individuals from the symbol program. As Jake gets his most memorable gander at his own symbol, we find out about the actual program. People can't inhale Pandora's air, however the symbol program empowers a human to connect with their own symbol, a hereditarily reared human Nausicaa half-breed, and capability as though they were a Nausicaa local. In his symbol body, Jake will actually want to walk in the future and inhale the air. The symbols seem to be their human drivers. At the point when Norm tells Jake his symbol appears as though him, Jake significantly says it seems to be his dead sibling. Jake and Norm enter the science division pretty much the time Dr. Beauty Augustine, Sigourney Weaver, the program's science lead, stirs in an exceptionally planned case that connects her to her symbol and flips open the top. Norm tells Jake he hears she loves, establishes better compared to individuals. She emerges from her unit and banters in Nausicaa with Norm. Happy with Norm's order of the language, she goes to Jake. She lets him know she really wants his sibling Tom, the PhD who prepared 3 years for the Pandora mission, however she needn't bother with Jake since Jake has no lab experience and has never been connected to a symbol. Jake attempts to infer that he's a fast student, however the surly elegance isn't dazzled. Back in the lab next morning, Jake and Norm are connected to their symbols interestingly. Jake, in his symbol, awakens in an alternate room with different symbols and staff. Inside a couple of seconds, Jake is making his controllers apprehensive on the grounds that, excited with his capacity to move his legs once more, he is moving excessively fast and attempting to walk, whenever he first has had the option to do as such since turning into a paraplegic. The human lab laborers can't stop him. A Nausicaa is north of 10 feet tall, some of the time more like 12 feet, and far more grounded than people. At the point when his long tail pushes over instruments, a staff part advises him to pause and rests once more. Jake overlooks him and blasts out of the room and into the sunlight. He winds up in a diversion region where different symbols are playing sports and staff, in their defensive stuff, are performing different obligations. Jake meets Elegance's symbol, who preferred tempered over human effortlessness. Goes with Jake to the encampment where he is in the long run urged to rest. Before he rests to rest, Jake examines his brain line, a long extremity that seems to be a twist of hair. Toward the finish of his line is a group of stowed-away rings. At the point when the symbol rests, the connection is broken and Jake himself stirs. Jake later meets Trudy Chacon, Michelle Rodriguez, a resigned marine pilot with whom he'll endure a little while becoming accustomed to his symbol and investigating Pandora. Jake will act as the entryway heavy weapons specialist on her group. Jake meets with Colonel Quaritch, who is lifting loads. The colonel tells Jake he's looked into his administration record and was dazzled with what he achieved on a portion of his visits, remembering one for Venezuela. The colonel cautions Jake about the risks looking for him on Pandora. He likewise expresses his conviction that the symbol program is a joke, yet that it offers a chance for an extraordinary surveillance mission, in the event that Jake can figure it out and let the colonel know what he needs to be familiar with the locals, how to convince them to create some distance from the unobtainium metal stores and how to hit them hard in the event that they won't. The colonel will make sure that Jake gets the medical procedure he really wants to recapture utilization of his legs. The colonel moves into an AMP suit, a bipedal exoskeleton utilized for missions on Pandora, and moves off. Relinked with his symbol, Jake flies over Pandora's surface in Trudy's gunship, alongside Effortlessness, Norm, and others. The group lands in a woodland, where Effortlessness and Norm start to take tests of the verdure and make estimations. Jake is occupied by his environmental factors and meanders into a field of helichoradian blossoms, which are very tall and therapist at Jake's touch. Inconvenience shows up when a titanothere, an intensely defensively covered, hammerhead animal, faces Jake. Beauty orders him to hold fast and not shoot, or, in all likelihood, the creature will lash out and charge. At any rate, his protective layer is excessively thick for weapons to have any impact. Jake effectively holds his ground, yet simply because another monster, a jaguar-like Thanator, has moved toward him from behind and has caused the titanotheres to withdraw and encompass their young. The Thanator then goes to Jake. Effortlessness advises him to run, and he's sought after by the Thanator in a pursuit that isolates Jake from his team. He loses his firearm and is brought down by the creature, yet liberates himself by delivering his rucksack. Eventually, the pursuit prompts a cascade, where Jake leaps to somewhere safe, leaving the Thanator thundering above him. Jake's group looks for him, however Trudy says they'll need to get back to base since night operations are not permitted. Effortlessness says he won't last the evening. It's currently night and we see Jake honing a long stick into a lance. Jake is being watched from a higher place, this time by a Na-6. The Na-6 points a bolt at Jake and is going to shoot, yet rules against it when little, ethereal, brilliant animals land on her bow. Later we learn they are exceptionally unadulterated spirits, otherwise called the Seeds of Iowa, the novice all-strong god. The toxopholite withdraws. Jake is followed by a pack of viper wolves. He plunges the finish of his lance into a flammable pitch-like fluid. He lights the end and uses it as a light against the viper wolves, who surround him, teeth uncovered, jaws grinding. The creatures assault Jake, he retaliates, kills some, and is brought somewhere near others. The toxopholite who was noticing Jake joins the fight on his side. She kills some viper wolves and makes the rest escape. She carefully finally gives some closure some whining injured creatures and expresses petitions over them. Jake endeavors to say thanks to her for assisting him with warding off the aggressors. She meets his thanks with disdain, lets him know this is his shortcoming, that they didn't have to bite the dust, and that he ought to return to where he came from. Jake inquires as to whether she has that impression, why she helped him. You have serious areas of strength for a. No trepidation, she makes sense of. Be that as it may, idiotic, Jake endeavors to follow his hero up into a tree, requests her assistance, and says he needs to learn. He's shocked and told to return, that sky individuals can't be educated. All of a sudden, the Seeds of Iowa return and begin to arrive on the anxious Jake. He asks what they are. Extremely unadulterated spirits, she answers, and Jake is covered by them, establishing a connection with his sidekick. At the point when the seeds float off, she yields and advises him to accompany her. As Jake attempts to stay aware of his hero, Neytiri, Zoe Saldana, he is felled by a bualo tossed by a watch of Omaticaean champions. Their chief is Tsute, Laz Alonso, next in line to the privileged position and the man Neytiri is supposed to wed. Neytiri prevents them from hurting Jake by telling them there has been a sign from Iowa. Tsute tells his men to bring him along to Tashik, father, inexact spelling, and Iowa, mother. Jake is introduced to Neytiri's folks, Itukan, West Studi, and Moat, CCH Pounder, who are the lord and sovereign of the clan, individually. Jake lets the seniors know that he is a champion, a dreamwalker, and his goal is to gain from them. Moat pricks Jake's chest and tastes his blood, announcing it is the desire of Iowa for him to live with the Omaticaya, and for Neytiri, but hesitantly, to be his educator in their ways and customs. After a custom social occasion, Jake is brought to his bed, a leaf high up in the home tree that encloses him like a case. As he nods off, human Jake is restored. At morning chow, every one of the researchers, including elegants, are centered around all that Jake needs to say. Norm appears to be extremely disheartened and gloomy. He was effortlessness' unique decision to bond with the Omaticaya. Indeed, even the military and corporate reps have warmed to Jake. Hometree sits on an enormous store of unobtainium, so Jake has all the earmarks of being their absolute best at persuading the Omaticaya to move, or encouraging the colonel on the most proficient method to drive them to do as such. He's educated that he has 3 months to accomplish his objective before the tractors show up. The following scenes rotate around symbol Jake's preparation with Neytiri and human Jake's reports on his encounters by means of the video log he directs after each day's movement. He bonds with his dire horse, a significant creature to the Na-6. Jake should figure out how to mount the creature and associate his brain line to its radio wire. Human Jake keeps on investigating the home tree's foundation and other Na-6 subtleties. Jake struggles with figuring out how to control his dire horse and is frequently alluded to as Sksong, Skown, by Neytiri and Tsute, which he lets us know signifies numbskull. Jake reports back to the colonel and Selfridge about the Omatikaya's home, the monster home tree. Under it is a huge store of unobtainium. Jake enlightens them regarding the design of the 1,000-foot-tall tree. Quaritch sees an amazing chance to obliterate the tree, yet Jake demands he be permitted to haggle with the Na-6 and persuade them to leave. Detecting that Jake is being controlled by Quaritch, Selfridge and the remainder of the tactical segment of the mining activity, effortlessness chooses to take her activity out of evade. She moves them into the Thank Heaven Mountains, a distant district of massive, drifting islands that are holy to the Na-6 and are likewise rich in unobtainium. Effortlessness needs her turf away from the RDA authorities and military sorts at the base. In his next video log, Jake examines his language illustrations and says his experience with the Na-6 is like field stripping a weapon. Enough redundancy and you can't resist the urge to learn it. This is intercut with scenes of his kept preparation with Neytiri, who shows him the Na-6 Woods Association. She lets Jake know that all energy is acquired and one day we need to give it back. Jake appears to fathom this, and as he says a request for a creature he chased and recently killed. Neytiri says that he is prepared for a significant soul-changing experience, to bond with and ride a Declan, a flying mountain banshee. To arrive at the banshee's settling grounds, Jake should go with Neytiri, Tsute, and 2 other Na-6 learners to the most noteworthy district of the Glory Be Mountains. A few factors, the level, the savagery of the untamed banshees, make this a risky example, yet Jake's absence of dread and effective security with his banshee gain him the hesitant appreciation of the Na-6 heroes present. Even Tsute. He makes the bond with the ringlets in his line, and as he rides the flying creature he comments that he's a sad horseman but rather he was destined to do this. Jake, Neytiri, and the others ride together to the Tree of Spirits, the most consecrated spot to the Na-6. While flying on a hunting foray, Jake and Neytiri are out of nowhere sought after and went after by an animal referred to the Na-6 as Torak, a Goliath and splendidly shaded flying mountain banshee with dangerous goals toward all that flies. Neytiri says its name signifies last shadow. The Torak's shadow, once seen, is typically the last shadow one at any point will see, as its assault is quite often lethal. Back at home tree, Neytiri shows Jake the skeleton of a forerunner of the present Torak. She lets him know the last individual to ride a Torak was hers granddad, who utilized the creature to join the 5 Na-6 clans in a period of extraordinary distress. Such an individual would procure the title Torak Mato, rider of the last shadow. At the point when Jake returns to his human structure, it's reasonable he's been changed by this most recent experience, for he expresses, out there is this present reality, in here is the fantasy. The colonel approaches him to let him know his main goal is achieved and he's to get back to Earth that day. What's more, great to his promise, the colonel has sorted out for Jake to seek the treatment he really wants to recover utilization of his legs. Jake wishes to defer his takeoff since he says he's right at the place where he's to be started into the clan and acknowledged as one of them, and afterward would have the status to haggle with the Na-6 to move. The colonel assents. Jake goes to a Na-6 service, where he learns the Na-6 accept that each individual can be conceived 2 times. Neytiri drives Jake to a position of petition, that the Tree of Voices, where they utilize their lines to bond with the tree. Neytiri tells Jake he can make a bow from the tree, what's more, that he can pick a lady. Jake lets Neytiri know that he has proactively picked her, and she says that she has picked him. They rest together under the tree and Jake awakens back in the lab. In the first part of the day, Neytiri stirs to falling trees, then the presence of tractors. Troopers are progressing as the timberland falls around Neytiri, who is hauling and conveying Jake to somewhere safe. At their remote spot, Jake is preparing to interface with his symbol, and when he at long last resuscitates, Jake moves onto one of the tractors and attempts to stop it, in the end crushing its camera framework and drawing some gunfire. Other Na-6 champions show up, while the colonel, checking on films back at the base, perceives Jake in his symbol structure as the individual who attempted to stop their main goal. The tractors proceed with their activity, clearing out the consecrated ground. At Home Tree, the Na-6 need war. Beauty and Jake contend against it. There's an extraordinary discussion. Tsute attempts to kill Jake, desirous at having discovered that Jake and Neytiri are mated for life when he and Neytiri were pledged. Jake proclaims he is a Na-6 and merits the option to talk. Unexpectedly, both effortlessness and Jake's symbols fall oblivious as the connections among them and their human structures are suddenly broken by the infuriated colonel, who captures Jake for attempting to stop the tractors. Elegance and Jake go head-to-head with RDA and military metal. Elegance uncovers that Pandora's tree structure an organization that has more brain associations than exist in the human mind, and that the Na-6 can take advantage of that organization. Subsequently, the Omaticaya won't ever leave Home Tree. Parker and the colonel talk about choices. He will send off an assault on Home Tree and us gas bombs to drive out the Na-6. Jake presses to be permitted to get back to the Omaticaya to attempt to persuade them to leave, and he's conceded 1 hour to accomplish that goal. Jake and Beauty are not invited back. Neytiri rejects Jake. Both Jake and Beauty are bound and abandoned by the Omaticaya, who are getting ready to battle against the people, who have shown up in a huge armada of flying boats. The armada dispatches gas canisters into Home Tree and the encompassing region. As the fight heightens, a large portion of the weaponry is designated at the root construction of Home Tree, which is brought down by a progression of blasts and weighty big guns. Numerous Omaticaya are killed. Moat liberates Jake and Beauty and requests that they save the clan. Jake shows up and is dismissed again by Neytiri when he attempts to comfort her. Neytiri's dad Itukan is killed by an enormous piece of shrapnel. His final request is for Neytiri to take his hallowed bow and expect initiative of their kin. The annihilation appears to be unending, and, out of nowhere, Jake and Elegance return to their human bodies and are instantly positioned collared for injustice. Norm is likewise captured for attempting to keep troopers from incapacitating their symbol structures. The Na-6 assemble at the Tree of Spirits. Trudy shows up at the cell which holds Jake, Effortlessness, and Norm. She tricks their watchman by saying she maintains that nothing should do with them, just to take out the gatekeeper a moment later. As they get ready to escape the base, Beauty is shot and injured by the colonel. The group flies Trudy's boat to the far-off lab in the drifting mountains, and they take a unit to one more spot in the woodland. Jake gets back to his symbol body. The confident gathering with the Omaticaya isn't to be, at first. Jake is a pariah, an outsider. So he settles on a strong choice. He understands that to recover the trust of the Na-6, he needs to take things to a more elevated level. He brings his banshee and embarks to find the Torok. His methodology is straightforward, however can without much of a stretch outcome in death. Jake accepts that the Torok never searches for an assault above himself, and subsequently he can be moved toward that way. Jake leaps off his banshee and onto the rear of the Torok. We next see him show up riding the Torok at the Tree of Spirits in an Omaticayan function. Jake has effectively reinforced with the Torok. The Omaticaya are shocked to see their most noteworthy legend work out as expected. Jake descends and clears his path through the horde of Na-6, who, awed, part before him. At the point when he arrives at Neytiri, each holds out an arm to the next and she says, "I see you." Tsute, who is presently clan pioneer, surrenders Jake's new job of Torok Mato. He concurs Jake much regard. Jake persuades Moat to help Elegance, who is kicking the bucket. Moat starts the arrangements, which include getting Beauty's human and symbol bodies set up at the Tree of Spirits. The thought is to move Elegance's cognizance to her symbol for all time. Moat spreads the word that Beauty should go through the Eye of Iwa, and that the extraordinary mother could decide to let her pass through to her symbol self, or she could pick to have Effortlessness stay with her. The custom isn't fruitful. However, before she kicks the bucket, Effortlessness lets Jake know that she has seen Iwa. Jake, devastated and irate, talks as Torok Mato and says now is the right time to make an impression on the sky individuals that this is their, the Na-6, property. However, to do as such, they initially should go to every one of the Na-6 groups to request that they come and battle as one. Tsute will be the Omaticaeans' new family pioneer and will likewise assist with energizing different factions to battle with them. The human military have gotten the mixture of Na-6 into the region, from a couple hundred to 2,000 soon. Going on like this, the colonel says as he tends to his soldiers, the Na-6 will before long add up to 20,000, so, all in all their edge will be overwhelmed. Instead of allowed that to occur, he proceeds, they should organize a pre-planned assault while they actually can. They will likely transform a space transport into the transporter of a monstrous bomb. Their objective is the Tree of Spirits. And the assault is anticipated 0600 the following day. That's what they trust. Assuming they obliterate the Tree of Spirits, the Na-6 will disappear and never approach this put from now on. Jake is occupied with mobilizing the Omaticaea. At the Tree of Spirits, he utilizes his line to bond with the tree and requests that Iwa investigate Beauty's recollections, focusing on that mankind killed their mom, Earth, the substance that safeguards the equilibrium of life. Neytiri shows up and tells Jake that Iwa doesn't favor one side. Quaritch masses his armada, for the most part as security for the Valkyrie transport. The bombship and the armada advance toward the Tree of Spirits. The unified Na-6 force starts to show up from the sky and on the ground. Jake on his Torek, Tsute, and different heroes take part fighting with the tactical airplane, basically Scorpion attack ships. Losses mount on the two sides. The gunships have unrivaled capability, yet are no counterpart for the Declans, who seize them and crush them against one another. Jake, riding the Torek, is sought after and shot at by Colonel Quaritch's Dragonfly transport. Trudy shows up and starts shooting at the Colonel's order transport. Neytiri's Banshee is killed, Norm's symbol is mortally injured and he bounces back to his human structure. Tsute takes on the bombship and is killed in the endeavor. Trudy bites the dust when her boat is obliterated in a hail of gunfire from Quaritch's Dragonfly. Neytiri watches this activity from the beginning. Jake endeavors to contact Tsute and is fruitless, similar to his endeavor to arrive at Trudy. In the meantime, the bombship surrounds the Tree of Spirits. Jake tells Neytiri through communicator to separate from the battle. Unexpectedly, through what's left of the encompassing woodland, a legion of Titanotheres, Pandora's intensely protected dinosaur-like creatures, shows up and connects with the Earth powers. They immediately ruin to infantry and fighters in amp suits. Thrilled that Iwa has heard Jake's request for help, Neytiri rejoins the battle with numerous other of Pandora's species behind her. When a Vanator shows up neighboring, it bows to her tamely. Jake and his Torek take to the sky to stand up to the bombship as the tactical's ground powers retreat in confusion. Drawing nearer from a higher place, Jake explosives the bombship. It crashes on fire and blasts well away from the Tree of Spirits. Jake additionally tosses explosives into weak pieces of the order transport. It starts to torch and go. Colonel Quaritch gets into an amp suit and hops liberated from the order transport before it crumbles in a bundle of blazes. He winds up at the brief camp set up by Elegance. In the camp, Jake is inside his symbol unit. Quaritch, set on killing Jake, is currently gone after by a Vanator that Neytiri had fortified with and ridden to the site. With the guide of his amp suit, the colonel kills the Vanator and Neytiri is caught under it. Before the colonel gets an opportunity to kill Neytiri, Jake shows up in his symbol. The two take part in battle, the colonel in his amp suit and Jake as his symbol, equipped just with a piece of line. Jake crushes the suit's plastic shade, the colonel pops it off, wears a breathing cover, and, before he moves off toward the designs that house the units, asks Jake how it feels to have double-crossed his race. You believe you're one of them? Time to awaken, he insults, as he crushes into the portable lab. Searching for Jake's unit, plan on obliterating it and human Jake. The fight resumes. Jake is gotten by an arm of the amp suit and dangles from his line before the colonel. In the interim, Neytiri has nearly liberated herself. The colonel presently draws Jake nearer to him and goes after his blade, aiming to complete Jake by cutting his throat. Abruptly, Neytiri shoots a bolt at the colonel, spearing him through the focal point of his chest. The colonel, faltering, can't proceed with his assault on Jake. Neytiri's subsequent bolt holds up right close to the first. It gets the colonel the amp suit to the ground. Be that as it may, much harm has been finished to the lab, which is spilling in the planet's noxious environment. Human Jake is conscious, however, experiencing issues both breathing and attempting to get a veil on. Neytiri shows up and helps Jake on with his cover. According to supporting human Jake, I see you. It's whenever they first have seen each other eye to eye, back at Damnation's door. The greater part of the leftover people are being walked into a bus to be sent back to Earth. In any case, a chosen handful Earth individuals, like Norm and Dr. Patel, are welcome to remain on Pandora. Jake closes down in his last video log, where we discover that he has decided to move his cognizance to his symbol for good. In a function like effortlessness, Jake goes through the eye of Iwa, also, awakens in his symbol with Neytiri looking after him.